Indiana has a chance to remain unbeaten this season, but they're going to face a very intriguing, very interesting Western Kentucky team.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, guys? It is Thursday, September 15th. This is Locked On Hoosiers, your one and only daily one-stop shop for everything IU athletics. I'm your host, as always, Jacob Rude. I want to thank you guys for making us your first listen every single day. Western Kentucky is both a familiar foe and one that IU fans probably don't know a ton about. It's a team that IU traditionally has played a decent amount in the non-conference slate, but not a team that you really pay attention to outside of the one time every couple of years you play them. It's an intriguing game for Indiana, so let's take a look at who Western Kentucky is this year, try to get a better sense of what type of team Indiana is going to be coming up against on Saturday. For one, Western Kentucky is 2-0 this season. But they faced Austin Peay, won 38-27 in week 1. They faced Hawaii, won 49-17 in week 2. Neither of those teams are very good, if I'm being pretty blunt about it. Austin Peay is an FCS team. Like Idaho, if you kind of want to compare opponents between Western Kentucky and Indiana, both Idaho, Austin Peay are FCS teams. SP Plus, which we reference a fair amount from Bill Connolly at ESPN, he does rank the FCS teams. Austin Peay is ranked 7th. Idaho is ranked 51st. Make of that what you will. If you really want to compare results and the teams they played, as I said, Western Kentucky beat Austin Peay 38-27. It was a game that they led throughout, but Austin Peay kept it close throughout. So it was as close as 21-20 after a field goal from Austin Peay kind of midway through the third quarter. So they did maybe struggle with them a little bit in the first game of the season, but it's not like IU didn't struggle with Idaho. We spent a couple days talking about that on Monday and Tuesday, so you can kind of compare there now. The other game on both teams' schedules is vastly different. Illinois is 63rd on SP Plus. Illinois is a kind of a middle-of-the-road potential bowl team in the Big Ten. Hawaii, for Western Kentucky, is arguably the worst team in college football this season among FBS teams. And, I mean, Western Kentucky did win 49-17, but that is a dreadful team. Hawaii lost 63-10 to Vanderbilt, 49-17 to Western Kentucky, and 56-10 against Michigan last week. So I don't know that you can really take a lot from them playing Hawaii. They won. It wasn't necessarily a close game, as the scoreline would indicate, though. It was just 28-10 until the fourth quarter when Western Kentucky scored 3 times to add some cushion to that. So if you want to compare, fine, you're kind of splitting hairs a little bit. What's clear is that Indiana represents a pretty sizable jump in the level of competition that Western Kentucky is facing this season. IU has its faults, but they are the best team Western Kentucky will yet play. And outside of playing Auburn on November 19th, IU might be arguably the best team they'll play all season. So this is a notable jump for them. So IU has a chance here, has a very good chance here of going 3-0. Now, the caveat is that if we're talking about SP Plus, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow as well, SP Plus predicts Western Kentucky to win this game. Western Kentucky is ranked higher than Indiana in SP Plus. It's one ranking. It is based on kind of numbers and algorithms. So I personally put some weight to it, but it is just one ranking. Western Kentucky is 66th. Indiana is 81st. Illinois is 63rd. So that gives you a reference point of, at least right now, where Western Kentucky falls in comparison to another opponent IU has played. This early in the season, it's kind of wonky. I don't know. I don't put it, and I've said this before. This isn't a cop-out. I said this last season. I don't put a ton into really any ranking this early in the season. There's a lot of projection. There's a lot of weird early season games. You need a bigger sample size, so I'm not really sure what to make of this team. And so let's take a deeper look at what their offense looks like, what their defense looks like, see if that will give us some answers as to what type of team Western Kentucky is heading into Saturday. Before we do that, though, BetOnline is one of today's sponsors, and they're your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, golf, college football, obviously. Now, Indiana on BetOnline is a 6-point favorite in this one. Again, it's kind of hard to tell how good this Indiana team is, how good this Western Kentucky team is. So I don't know that I would advise you to do anything unless you're feeling really good about maybe plus 200 on the Western Kentucky money line. If you're concerned about what Indiana did in that first half last week, I don't know that I'd blame you. So if that's something you're looking to do, head on over to BetOnline on the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Big shout out to all of you guys for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every single day, your first watch every single day. I saw you guys commenting on the YouTube video on Wednesday. Big shout out to all you guys. If you guys haven't already, head on over to YouTube, subscribe. Let's get that to 500 subscribers before the start of college basketball season. That's our goal we're aiming for. We can do it. If you're listening and you're not watching, real quick, head on over there. You don't even have to hit pause. Just head on over, subscribe to the YouTube, help us out. It's just Locked On Hoosiers. Simple, plain, and simple. Let's start on this Western Kentucky offense. Last season, it was as air raid of an offense as air raid offenses come. I'm sure you guys remember playing them in Bowling Green last season, and it was a nightmare. That was not a fun game in any way, shape, or form. The positives is that offensive coordinator Zach Kitley is gone. He took a head coaching job, I believe, or he's the offensive coordinator at Texas Tech, fits perfectly into the Big 12. Replacing him very oddly, three co-offensive coordinators: Ben Arbuckle, QB coach; Josh Crawford, the receivers coach; and Zach Langford, the offensive line coach. I don't think I've ever seen that before. It's rare to have co-offensive coordinators with just two guys. Three guys is bizarre, if I'm being honest. So, offensive coordinator change, QB change. Bailey Zapp was really good, and he caused all kinds of problems for the Hoosiers. He's on the New England Patriots now. Not shocking that he made his way to the NFL. So IU doesn't have to deal with either the offensive coordinator or the quarterback that gave IU all it could handle last season. Austin Reed is the starter this season. He won the job in camp. IU has faced a fair amount of teams, every team so far, that has had a QB battle of sorts. Austin Reed won the job. He's a little different than Zapp was, maybe a little more mobile. We're not talking like Idaho last week, where that was a very mobile quarterback, but someone that can throw on the run a little bit, get out of the pocket on some bootlegs, some play actions, things like that. Statistically, Reed has thrown for 551 yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions this season. completing 64.6% of his passes. He's been effective. He's run 12 times for 41 yards and a score, but his long is only 12 yards, so he can get out of the pocket, but probably not someone you have to spy, similar to what IU ended up having to do a bit in that second half against Idaho. Receiving-wise, Dawood Davis is the primary guy. I'd imagine Tywan Mullen is going to be on him a fair amount on Saturday. He has 11 catches for 202 yards and a touchdown. Malachi Corley, 9 receptions. 3 of those are for touchdowns, 73 total yards on the season. Jalen Hall has a trio of receptions and a touchdown. Joshua Simons only caught 1 pass, but it was a 47-yard touchdown. Michael Matheson has 6 catches for 32 yards. So they really spread the ball around. In total, there are 3, 6, 9, 11 guys that have caught passes. Now, a couple of those games have been blowouts. You get the second, the third stringers in there. I don't know how many of those guys are realistically rotating through, but you can expect Davis, Corley, Matheson, all those guys have 6 or more catches. I assume they're going to be parts of that offense. A familiar name, as we've mentioned, I think before, is your starting running back, your primary running back, Davion Irvin Poindexter, 24 carries for 91 yards and a touchdown through 2 games. That, more than anything, gives you a sense of that how much they're going to run the ball. Just 61 carries through 2 games, so 30 carries. Statistically, it's barely fewer than the passes attempted, but if you want to factor in running out the clock late, garbage time, things like that, this is still a team, maybe not to the extent they were last year, but still a team that does most of its damage through the air. I mean, just looks yardage-wise, 249 rushing yards through 2 games. Isn't eye-popping compared to 551 passing yards. So this is still a team that I think is going to focus on getting things done through the air, which is, I feel like a positive for Indiana with their secondary. Now, Jalen Williams had a rough outing last week. The secondary wasn't great. They were a little boom or bust. And Reed hasn't necessarily turned the ball over. 2 interceptions in 2 games. He can, but he's thrown 1 in each game. Maybe IU can take advantage of that. They didn't have any takeaways last week. I'm sure, certain, positive, whatever you want to say. I know Tom Allen is preaching that point this week in practice. So I would not be surprised if it's a ball-hawking, hungry defense that Indiana has on Saturday. But it's going to be one that's tested. I'm sure Indiana's defense doesn't like the fact that they got lit up a bit last year. And there's a lot of guys that are back from that defense, especially that secondary. Tywan Mullen, Jalen Williams, Devon Matthews, Noah Pierre, Josh Sanguinetti. I'm sure I'm leaving some out, but all those guys were a part of the defense that just bled points last year. Cam Jones, obviously, but those guys in the secondary, I would imagine a little bit of pride might kick in, and they don't want that to happen again. That was, I don't want to say embarrassing, but frustrating certainly last season to see how easily Western Kentucky just went down the field and scored. So this is going to be a back and forth game. Western Kentucky is not a team that cares about time of possession. IU clearly is not a team that cares about time of possession. Both teams are going to throw the ball. Buckle in. This is going to be like a 4-hour game on Saturday. So get your grill started. Make sure you have food ready because you're going to need a lunch and then a maybe dinner before this one is all over. Let's look at the defense and get a sense of what the Hoosiers are coming up against, what they might be able to attack for against Western Kentucky on Saturday. We'll look at that here in just a moment. Last season, Western Kentucky was not known for its defense, and this season, I would say that is largely still the same. Last season, their defense was just there. It felt like at times to give the offense a breather before getting back on the field and attacking. And you've kind of seen with the point totals they've given up, 27 points to an FCS team, 17 points to a Hawaii team. I didn't mention it. I wasn't kidding when I said they were one of the worst teams in college football. SP Plus has them 128th out of 131 teams. Legitimately one of the very worst teams in college football. Still scored 17 points on this Western Kentucky team, and that wasn't really garbage time either. They were scoring against the starters. So there is a pathway here. Indiana's going to score, and if I'm being frank, if Indiana can score against Illinois, I would really hope that they can score against Western Kentucky. Looking, one of the things that jumped off is that they lead FBS in turnovers. They have 10, 7 interceptions, 3 fumble recoveries. Now, having said that, 6 of those came against Hawaii. Hawaii threw 5 interceptions in that game. Again, I don't mean to harp on the point, but IU should have scheduled Hawaii this season instead of Cincinnati. So they do lead FBS in takeaways, but almost all of those came in one game. We'll see to what degree that was Hawaii and to what degree that was Western Kentucky. It's an experienced secondary, but we've seen that again. This is a good Western Kentucky team. It doesn't, when you've already played Illinois, that's kind of one of the benefits. We talked a lot about the negatives of playing Illinois at the beginning of the season. I still don't like it, but when you've seen Illinois already, that gives you a sense of like these games feel a little bit easier. Now, hopefully IU isn't thinking too much like that because they damn near gave the game away last week, thinking potentially how much easier Idaho was. You can blame it on the weather, you can blame it on whatever, but I mean, this isn't as talented a team, but it's still talented enough to beat you if you don't take them seriously. The good news, I guess, is that hopefully IU got its wake-up call, especially offensively last week, because that was really bad that first half. The Western Kentucky defense has not been all that stout. 27 points from Austin Peay. They had 319 yards in that game. 17 points, 360 yards from Hawaii. So those aren't low numbers. Those aren't high numbers, but they're not low numbers. So again, IU is going to represent a step up in competition, and there's some reason to think that they could present a lot of problems for Western Kentucky. Individually, Jaquez Evans has 18 tackles to lead Western Kentucky. 3.5 sacks leads Western Kentucky as well. Will Ignont has 14. Juwan Jones has 11. These are all tackles, not sacks. When it comes to sacks, we mentioned Evans is first. Khalef Helassi has 2. I hate doing this because I hate absolutely butchering these names. Both just saying them, and it almost feels disrespectful to some of these guys. Interceptions, Upton Stout and Caleb Oliver both have a pair. Stout has a touchdown, so a pick 6. Juwan Jones, who we mentioned, had a pick 6 as well for his only touchdown. BJ Wagner has an interception, so there's your 6 interceptions on the season. So it's going to be, I mean, this defense has done some things, but they've shown that they can be attacked. They've given up 214 passing yards, 125 rushing yards this season. So we'll see if IU can find those holes and attack them. Again, that secondary is good. We mentioned, even if it was 5 interceptions against Hawaii, it's 5 interceptions. At a certain point, it doesn't really matter who the opponent is. If you can pick them off 5 times, you have a pretty good secondary. And they have a couple options on that defensive line, a couple linebackers that are going to be problems as well. So this isn't a walk in the park necessarily. It's a tougher game than Idaho. I would say it's maybe not quite as tough as Illinois, but IU's going to have to show up. They can't afford to I was going to say punt away a first half, which is kind of what they did. They gave away a first half and made it count in the third quarter. I don't know that you're going to be able to do that. Both if you give away a first half, Western Kentucky might have you down by more than 10. You're not going to be able to flip a switch against them quite the way they did against Idaho either. So this is going to be a game that Indiana has to execute from start to finish, and that's going to be the case every game from here on out. There is no wiggle room if Indiana wants to go to a bowl game, and this is a must win if Indiana's going to a bowl game. Any discussion about that has always included beating Western Kentucky because you have very little wiggle room down the line in Big Ten play. So staying unbeaten in this season and in non-conference play, very important on Saturday. We'll get the rest of the details to you guys about the game, some matchups, some storylines to watch, all on that in tomorrow's episode. But thank you guys for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. We'll be back with you then to get you everything you need to know about this game on Saturday. Know what your team is up against across the Big Ten with Locked On Big Ten. Everyday host Nate Dickinson and the local experts of Locked On take you across the Big Ten in 30 minutes. Make Locked On Big Ten your second listen, Locked On Big Ten. I'll be on there today. I think the episode's going up a little bit later, so if you're listening to this in the morning, check in the afternoon to Locked On Big Ten. Otherwise, I'm on there talking about the upcoming week of action across the Big Ten. Give us a listen. Follow us, Locked On Hoosiers, on Twitter at LO_Hoosiers. Subscribe to the podcast, as I said already. Leave a quick rating and review. Helps us out a ton. Most importantly, though, guys, have a terrific Thursday in LEO.